Hello 3160 class. This Tuesday is technically our last session for the year for the course, but this class is a little bit unique because it's really more kind of me giving you some information and answering some questions that you have asked. So I think it's just as easily done online. That allows you to be able to have the convenience of viewing it and doing the work at your own pace and your own convenience, because it's really not necessary for us to meet in person for this particular session. In fact, this first part of it about the institutional review board is something that sometimes I've had people from the outside come and present. I'm using slides here that were provided and prepared by Dr. Hillary Snyder. She used to be a research compliance officer here at the university. She now works at the University of Toledo, but she helped me to put some of these ideas together. I remember at the beginning of the course last fall, you and I did a thing on the board of what do you already know about classroom research and what would you like to learn more about. And at that time, one of the things that you asked was a question about what kinds of research do you have to have approval to do, because a number of you had heard of this idea of an institutional review board or a human subjects board, and you wanted to know more about that. And so I kept a note about that, and I wanted to make sure before the year was over that we came back and got a chance to talk about that topic. So as I said, I worked with Dr. Snyder, and I got slides from her that she's used before, and I want to just kind of work you through that a little bit. And so that's going to be kind of the first part of the time we spend together, and then I'll also spend some time with you talking about the upcoming assignment that you have and some things that make sure that we're all on the same page. So listen closely. There is a short assignment that I have you do at the end of this presentation that you will post up at Canvas, and I'll explain that very briefly at the end as well. So the title here is Conducting Research with Human Subjects, as in using people as part of the research that we do. And that's the case with you when you do action research in a school. You have real students that are involved with your research, and it's important to think a little bit about what that means legally and also just kind of ethically on a university campus. So there is this IRB, which stands for Institutional Research Board, and it is made up of faculty and others that are appointed by the university to serve. And that group is charged with protecting the rights of anybody who is involved with research involved with the university. And so they are essentially working for, helping the federal government to make sure that the guidelines that are set, federal guidelines that are set for human research, is being done right. So the IRB, the Institutional Research Board, begins by doing some kind of an initial review. So somebody is interested in doing a study, and they're going to take a look and see what that study is all about at the very beginning. Also, once you have a study underway, they will do continuing review of that. So here's an example. I began a study years ago when I started teaching at the university of 7th and 8th graders in my math class at St. Rose. And I was going to be collecting data, having them write things. I was interviewing them. I was videotaping them. And I got permission to conduct an ongoing study of how these students learn mathematics so that I could use that in my presenting and my writing and teaching and everything else. Once they initially approved that and said, you can go ahead and collect this data, then every single year for over 20 years in a row, I think I actually did it 25 years in a row, I had to go back to the review board and have them do a continuing review. In other words, to say, yes, you can continue to collect the data, your study is going okay, and you have our approval. Sometimes along the line they will propose a change, that maybe you've been videotaping for all these years, but we recommend that you no longer do that. Or you give them that initial review and they look at it and say, well, we're going to approve you doing this research as long as you've done this and that. They will also follow up on things that come up. So if somebody is involved in the research and they're not comfortable with it and they're upset and they want to contact somebody, they can go to the Institutional Review Board for any complaints or concerns. Also, if they recognize that somebody might be breaking federal regulations or BGSU policies, they can come and ask those questions too. So they're kind of just overseeing any research that people at the university are involved with. Now, why is that so important? It goes way back. There have been a number of different things in history, but probably the big one that this is based on was a public health service study. It was conducted over a 40-year span of time on African American men from the 30s to the early 1970s. And what they were trying to do was to trace the history of syphilis in these folks. And the problem is that they offered these men free medical exams and meals and burial insurance if they were willing to be part of this study, where they were actually being given some form of syphilis to see how it would act in their body over the course of decades. Completely unethical. They never should have done this study in the first place. They had no approval. They had no consent from the people involved. They just said, hey, if you want to be involved in this study, we'll give you free exams and meals and so forth. And they said, yeah, we'll do that. 1947, they didn't even treat the participants. And in the process of this entire study, a lot of people died. There were a lot of people, obviously wives and children, that were impacted. Very unethical. And the biggest problem at the root of all of this is you don't go about doing this kind of experimental research on people without telling them exactly what you're going to do with them and getting their approval. And if they don't approve of it, they shouldn't be able to do that. And so this Belmont report came out in 1979 saying we're not going to let this kind of thing happen again. Whenever people are involved in any kind of research, whether it's psychological, whether it's medical research, whatever, we have to have approval and consent that the people involved say it's okay to do this research on me. And so the Belmont report laid out three different pieces, three different principles, if you will: the respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. So for respect for persons, they have to choose to participate in the study. They have to be willing to do that. So I can't conduct a study on campus with a group of students in my class without asking them if they're willing to participate. And if you say I don't want to be part of the study, I have to respect that and not involve you in the study. Same thing was true of my 8th graders all those years. Every single year I explained to them and to their parents what I was doing in terms of math education research, and they always had the right to say, I don't want to be involved in this. And I could just check the box and say, it's okay, I will not use your work in my study. So they have to make that choice. Specifically with my 8th graders, they're minors, right? So these students that I was teaching were 12, 13, 14 years old. They had to say, yes, it's okay, and sign a form. But since they were not 18 or older, their parents also had to sign a form saying that their children would participate. If I didn't have a signed letter from the student and his or her parent, I was not allowed to use them in my research. As soon as the student is 18 or greater, which you are, so if I want to do a study on campus, I don't have to get your parents' support, but I have to have your choice to participate. You have to sign off for it. Beneficious means that the benefits outweigh the risks. So any research that we do, no matter how simple it is, there probably are going to be some kind of simple, if not big, risks. An example of that would be a medical thing, right, where we're trying to test some type of medical procedure or maybe some type of oral medicine that a person is going to take to treat some condition. And we tell them this is an experiment. We don't know if this medicine is going to work, but we want to try it out on you. Well, that's a little scary, but the benefits outweigh the risk because there is a good opportunity or a good chance that this medication is going to make you well, and without the medication, you're going to die. So the benefits are going to outweigh the risks here. Luckily, in education, we're not usually in a life and death type of situation, but the bottom line is if we're doing some kind of research on our students, maybe an experiment, where we're testing out our use of graphing calculators with teaching a topic when another group is not using graphing calculators, there is a risk, because it's a risk that the students who are not using the technology are going to learn less. And so they need to know that we're testing this out and we're going to be comparing groups, and that the benefits will hopefully outweigh the risks. Lastly, this justice issue means that no group should bear risks when the benefits apply broadly. In other words, we should not think back again to that case that I just gave you. Why would we choose a group of African American men and do a study on them that will hopefully benefit the entire society? That's not right, and no individual group should be bearing those risks, so it has to be a just study. So those three things have to be part of every research study now, no matter how simple or how complicated, in education, in medicine, and so forth. We have to have respect for the persons, the benefits outweigh the risks, and there has to be justice in the process. So the Institutional Review Board is regulated and required by the federal government. BGSU policy requires it, and obviously it's a matter of ethics that researchers are not always able to weigh those risks and benefits on their own. So somebody on the outside has to take a closer look at it. So there's two different definitions that drive this that are really important for us to think about. The first one is what the definition is of a human subject. A human subject is a living individual. That's important, right? I mean, they have to be alive. So therefore, this IRB process does not apply to somebody who is deceased. That's important for somebody who's in medicine. If, for example, you're using cadavers in a lab, you can't get their permission to use their bodies, right? But they can give that in advance. They may donate their body to science. But to be a human subject, you've got to be a living individual. You have to have information. If it's a biospecimen, that really applies more to science. And in the research itself, research means that it has to be systematic, it has to be generalizable, and it has to be clarified what is not research. So in order to be research, I think those two main things to help clarify it are systematic and generalizable. So we get to this idea of action research. So here are a couple of examples for you to think about. Kind of think about these in your head and say, what would you say? So here's a study. I want to know if the use of iPads in my classroom is going to improve my student grades. So I compare the grades of my students this year who use iPads to the grades of students last year who didn't. And what I'm trying to do is to improve my course and my teaching. Will that require IRB approval? Yes or no? The answer is no, it doesn't. Why? Because it's systematic. Okay, I am going through here and figuring out, I'm going to use iPads this year, I'll compare them to last year, but it's not generalizable. These are my students over the course of 2 years. Notice here that the purpose is to improve my course. This is all about making me a better teacher and saying, hey, I wonder if when I use iPads, students will do better. It's only for my information to improve my teaching. So it's not generalizable to the whole population. It's a classroom study that I'm doing, and so no, this would not require IRB approval. So here's a variation of that. I want to know if the use of iPads improves student grades. So what I do now is I get together with all of the other 5th grade teachers in several schools among different districts. We're going to provide iPads to one of our classes, but not to the other. And we're going to collect data. And now we're going to have a whole bunch of teachers involved from several different districts. Some students will have iPads, some won't. We'll run some statistical analysis and figure out, are those iPads making a difference in our classes? We combine all of their grades and we draw some conclusions. Does that require IRB approval? Yes, it does. Absolutely, because this is systematic. All right, we got a whole system here. We are assigning some students to a control group, some to an experimental group. We're using multiple teachers, multiple schools. We're combining the grades together, and we're going to try to come up with some kind of a generalizable conclusion showing that when these multiple classes across districts used iPads, students did better. We could write about that, publish, we could present. That's definitely a bigger study that applies more than just improving my own practice. So this one would have to have approval by that institutional research board. What if I want to know what students think about my teaching or a class or an assignment? So what I do is I give them an assignment and then I give them a survey at the end of the year and I gain their feedback. I'm going to use those results to make next year's class better. Will that require IRB approval? No. It's perhaps systematic, but it's not generalizable, right? It is getting feedback informally, really, through a survey with my own class so that hopefully next year I can teach them better. So that it would not require approval by the board. How about this one? I want to help other teachers by posting informative links and information on a website that I've created. So I want to know if teachers think my website is helpful. So I create that website and I ask teachers to fill out a survey about the site. Oops. Does that require IRB approval? No. No, it doesn't, because I've created a website and all I'm trying to do is just to get some input from other people. What do you think of the site that I created? Do you find it useful? I'm asking them informally on a survey. This is not generalizable. This isn't something I'm going to say everybody should be creating. I'm just trying to get feedback. So no approval would be needed there. I found an activity I use in my classroom help my students, and I wonder if it could help other students. So I told another teacher about it, and she is willing to try it in her class. So she's going to try this teaching strategy in her class. I'll try it in mine. We're going to compare our results. Is that going to require approval? Yes, probably so. Because it's systematic, I have an activity and I have a way of assessing whether it's helping students. I'm getting somebody else involved. They're going to collect data. We're going to compare her data to my data and probably are going to in some way publish or speak about this. This is more than just improving my classroom practice. This is about spreading ideas that I think other people maybe could or should be doing. This one is going to border, we probably ought to contact the IRB and find out about approval for this one. The school library is thinking about ordering new books and they'd like ideas on what to order. So I'm going to survey my students. I'm going to give each student a survey and say, what kind of books would you like to read and include in the library? I keep hitting the wrong button, sorry. Is that required? IRB approval? No. This is a survey. The school library wants to know what the students think. So yeah, it's somewhat systematic in that we're trying to gather survey data, but we're not doing anything with the data other than using it to make a decision about books that we're going to order, and that doesn't have any generalizable implications. It's not even actually considered research at all. So we would not worry about IRB approval. So here's the way that IRB does it. There is a form available at the IRB.net website, and I actually put it up at Canvas also for your easy access. It's called a review determination form. So if a student at the university thinks that their study might require approval from the IRB, then the first step is to fill out that review determination form. And the form actually will ask you if it's systematic, is it generalizable, to explain the study. It takes just a few minutes to fill out the form, and you submit it, and they will give you an almost immediate feedback saying, no, don't worry about it. This is not actually considered formal research. You don't have to worry about it. Or, yeah, this is one where you're going to need approval. So here's where it gets interesting with action. I can tell you that in the early days of our program, the first couple of years, every student in action in the 3160 class, when we first created it, was required to fill out IRB paperwork to get their project approved. What happened was I got a lot of pushback from the IRB office because they said, you know what, your students are doing action research. Almost all of them do not fall into the category of research that requires IRB approval. And you're basically inundating us with 20 or 30 pieces of paperwork every year that are just not necessary. So they ask us to sort of back off on that, and instead that if we have a student individually that feels like their project might require IRB approval, that they should fill out the determination form individually and do that. So since that time, out of 20 to 25 or more people in my 3160 class, in a typical year, I might have one or two people who even file a determination form. The vast majority don't. I would say that the situation in which you would want to fill out a form and possibly get IRB approval would be if you're doing a lot of comparison. I'm going to do this with one class and this with a different class, and I'm going to compare their results. Or I'm going to work with another teacher and she's going to use computers and I'm not going to use computers, and we're going to compile our results and do some type of like experimental study where I'm treating different groups of students differently and trying to compare them. That kind of borders on being systematic and generalizable. But for the most part, vast majority, 90% or more of the projects that are done in 3160 and 4160 are not necessary to go through the whole IRB process. But if you're not sure, there is a review determination form that you and your advisor can complete and submit. And again, that's here at Canvas, and it's available through the IRB website. So when you fill out that determination form, they're going to do one of two things. They're either going to ask, they're going to tell you that it's not research with human subjects, or it is research with human subjects. And if it is, you fill out that form, and it's actually they will give you a result within 4 weeks. So you after sort of the determination form says yes, you do have to do that. We do consider this to be research with human subjects, and you do need to do the full process. Then you fill out a more complete IRB application form with assent forms, consent forms, etc., all the details, and within about 4 weeks they will give you a determination as to whether that research is approved. So again, vast majority, they would not consider it research with human subjects. They're going to say, no, it's not systematic or it's not generalizable, don't worry about it. So if you have a question about that, talk to your advisor. If you and your advisor have a question, come and see me about it, and I could help you with that too. But hopefully this will help you to understand that. So this is actually an exemption. It's a federal exemption that says research in commonly accepted educational settings are exempted from having IRB approval, such as research on regular and special ed strategies, research on effectiveness or comparison among instructional techniques, curricula, or classroom management tools. So you can kind of see there that if a teacher is doing research on their teaching practices, their strategies, or saying, hey, I liked it when I did this and students seem to like it better when I did that, and it's all for your own classroom, then you are generally, in terms of the federal regulation, you're exempted from having to have that. You have to be able to sort of prove that it won't adversely affect students' opportunity to learn. That's a key point. So where do you get extra information? The top link here is to the Office of Research Compliance, personnel and all the stuff there, regulations, FAQs, and then the IRB net. IRBnet.org gives forms and different instructions. I would say that probably 90% of Action students never have anything to do with the IRB process. But if you're in that situation that's a gray area where you think yours might actually be considered systematic and generalizable, talk to your advisor, and you may need to fill out the determination form to see whether an entire IRB approval is going to be necessary for your project. So what I would like for you to do as an assignment, very brief assignment to follow up with what I just did here, and then I've got a few other things I want to talk to you about in a minute, but I'm going to have you go to the 3160 website and go under the assignments link right here, and you will find an assignment that's called IRB Reflection. This is a required assignment. A way to consider this is there's no specific points for it, but it is considered your participation for this class period. And so if it's not completed or completed acceptably or on time, then you will lose points in your participation area. So what I need for you to do when you click there, it says in the provided box, briefly describe an example of classroom research you could do in your own classroom. And I said here, preferably what you're already considering doing next year, but it could be a project you read about or just something you've thought about. And then explain whether you think that research that you described would require an IRB approval and why or why not, according to what we presented in the PowerPoint. Your total entry here doesn't need to be more than a couple of short paragraphs, just a few minutes to do this. But the purpose is to ensure that you understand what kinds of projects will require and which ones do not require IRB approval. You have until midnight Wednesday night to submit this short description. So when you click on Submit Assignment, there is a text box here. You can either type it directly in, or you could type it in Word and copy and paste it in, and then just click the Submit button at the bottom and have that turned in before midnight Wednesday night. So that'll be just a short assignment, kind of proving to me that you understand this IRB process. So, second thing I'd like to do, if I can find it here, is just a few things with the 3160 to make sure we have a little bit of closure as you go on to write your papers this semester. So we talked about the IRB process. I want to go through a couple things about your paper requirements and then some timing and deadlines for the spring semester. So just to be clear here, we've talked about this throughout the semester, throughout the fall, but when you write your final paper for 3160, it's going to start with a title page and an abstract. Remember that abstract is a sort of a one-paragraph brief description of kind of summarizing what is in your entire paper, what it talks about. You put that in italics on the front page. When you actually do the research next year, the abstract becomes much more important because it will talk about here's what I studied, here's what I did, and here's what I found out. And it gives your entire study in just a few sentences for a quick read for somebody. So that's what I'm going to try to get you to practice, that kind of just a one short paragraph summary of the entire paper the person is about to read. And then you have that introduction section. That talks about really what is the problem that you're investigating. Why is it important to you? What is the issue? You know, I'm interested in cooperative learning in a fourth grade science class, and I got interested in this because I saw this study by blah blah blah. And you're going to explain, you know, that introduction of what's going on and what you're going to be talking about. Then after the introduction, we've spent quite a bit of time talking about literature review last fall. So you're not the first person to study that topic. You won't be the last. What research has already been done on that topic, and what do we know? So you're going to go through a variety of different studies that other people have done, citing using APA style. You're going to cite other studies that other people have done and pull together kind of that body of research that we already know about your topic. That's really the heart and the soul of this paper. And then the third thing you do is a draft of a methodology section. If you're going to conduct a study in your class next year about that problem or that topic, what would it look like? What kind of methods would you use? What are you thinking at this point about how you will approach that with your classes? We consider it a draft because next year when you get into a classroom, you might discover that the study has to be tweaked a little bit. And so what you were planning on doing for methods might not be the final way that you do it. But give us just a glimpse of what type of methodology that you would use to conduct your study. I have posted at Canvas 3 different examples of 3160 papers that people have done in the past. One of them is a middle childhood paper, one is AYA Math, one is AYA Science. So I invite you to go to Canvas, into that folder, and take a look at those sample papers. You get an idea of some really good ones that people have done in the past. Ordinarily, this entire paper, including a bibliography, will run about 10 pages or so. Sometimes a little shorter, a couple pages shorter, sometimes a couple longer, but think 10 pages or so. I will tell you, by the way, that most students in the past have told me when they really got down to doing the 3160 paper, it's something that they could knock out in a weekend. It's just not something that has to take months and months for you to do. You just have to get serious about it, talk to your advisor, knock out a draft, put it in your advisor's hand, let them give you some input, tweak it, fix it, and get it done. So it doesn't take that long. You have lots of time to do it, but it really doesn't take, my students have told me over and over, it just doesn't take that long to do once you get serious about it and sit down and start knocking it out. Remember also that your advisor will fill out a checklist at the end. They're going to comment on your ability to meet deadlines, your ability to complete in a meaningful way that written paper, Your communication skills with them, calling, talking in person, emailing, etc., that you are in communication with them, and in general, they will rate you for your professionalism. And that does have a huge impact on your grade here. So if you ignore your advisor and you don't pull them in till the very end, or they don't see a draft until it's too late for them to even comment on it, they will knock you down in that area and it will impact your grade. Conversely, as long as you're communicating with them, working with your advisor, and using them for what they have signed up to do, to let them help you, then you'll probably get a perfect score in that area. But make sure that you are communicating with your advisor. They will fill that checklist out and submit it to us no later than April 22nd. So this is the way the timing works. You're going to be doing your paper writing between now and early April, anytime in that time frame. Your final deadline date is April 15th. Again, I can't emphasize more. Don't make this a mountain out of the molehill, right? This paper is a standard. You've written papers in classes before. Do your best, knock the paper out, get it done, and get it done well. I have had a number of people in 3160 who have written their paper in draft form in February, given it to their advisors, and done a final version and had it in by the 1st of March. That's not unusual. So sometimes people are done with this literally 6-7 weeks before the deadline. If you can do that, that's fantastic. Get it off your back, move on to other things. But April 15th is the final drop dead deadline that it has to be approved by your advisor, done, turned in our hands so that we can be getting your grades. Then your advisors complete that checklist within a week after that, so they turn that in by April the 22nd. And the other date that I want to make sure is on your calendar is Tuesday, May the 5th, from 4:30 to 6:30. It's a common time with an extra half hour added. That is the date of the capstone colloquium. That's the day that the seniors present their research that they did for their capstone project. As juniors in 3160, you are required to be there. It's a joint group, so they are presenting to the rest of the seniors, plus to all of the juniors, plus parents and administrators and guests, and freshmen and sophomores are always invited too. And I know that some of you have attended the colloquium in the past, but this time around you're required to be there. You get a good glimpse that way of what other people did this year, and that will help you to be able to frame your project to make sure it's as good as possible next year, and give you a glimpse of what that colloquium actually looks like, so you're ready to do that in another year, because that will be you next May, which is awesome. In the meantime, I would suggest, this is just kind of an advising point that I wanted to toss in, that now that you are in Block 1 and you're headed toward Block 2 in the fall, this is a good time for you to check your degree audit and make sure you're on target. I will probably mention this in one of the Friday morning seminars as well for everybody, but we used to, back even as recently as 6 or 8 years ago, we used to do what was called a junior audit, where the College of Education would actually look at all of the people who are about to go into Block 2 in the fall and make sure that they're not missing anything. But we don't do that junior audit anymore, because you already have a degree audit that you can pull up online. So what I suggest that you do is sometime soon to pull up your degree audit, look it over, and see if anything just doesn't seem right. Like there's a class that still isn't accounted for, or something you took that you were supposed to get a course substitution for, but it's never come through. Something that just doesn't look right. And if there is, send an email or make an appointment to come in and ask questions. We definitely don't want any surprises next year. And I have had that happen. I've had people in their last semester or two come into my office and say, for some reason, it's showing that I don't have my second science class yet. And then we discover that the second science class that they thought that they would be counted from what they took in high school actually didn't count. And suddenly that student discovers they've got another class they've got to take to graduate on time. We don't want that kind of surprise to come up in your senior year. So take time to look at that degree audit and ask me any and all questions about what you think doesn't look right on there if you think something's missing. So just a piece of advice there outside of the 3160 class. So if you have any remaining questions about your project, about the IRB process, about your degree audit, stop in and see me. My office hours this semester are Tuesday and Wednesday from 2 to 4, or of course you can email or text me anytime and we can get together, or I can answer it electronically as well. So In the process, make sure that you have looked at those final papers that I uploaded for you at Canvas, and make sure that you're working with your faculty advisor or mentor to discuss your project and look at drafts so you can keep things moving. And make sure you have, that's the wrong date on there. It's supposed to be May the 5th is the capstone colloquium. So make sure that you have that May 5th on your calendars as well. Let me know if you got any questions. Good luck with Block 1. I'll be seeing all of you on a regular basis. That's one of the reasons we didn't meet live today. I figure I'll be seeing you most Fridays anyway, if not in my Math Methods class. But good luck with Block 1, and we will be in touch.